Hello, my name is Jasmine Euler. My presentation is on the effects of pre-workout supplement on lean mass, muscular performance, and subjective workout experience. So let's move on to some background information. So athletes use two types of approaches. The first one is over-the-counter dietary supplement, and the second one is nutrient timing. So basically, nutrient timing is a type of strategy that involves the consumption of combinations primarily of proteins and carbohydrates in or around an exercise session. So what is a dietary supplement? It's basically a manufactured product intended to supplement the diet when taken orally. So that includes pills, capsules, tablets, and even some fluids. Some dietary ingredients would be vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbs. So athletes ingest and take pre-workout to help maximize or just improve their training adaptation and help promote recovery. So most of those ingredients include creatine, you got monohydrates, amino acids, you have biotin, plant extracts, carbohydrates, and caffeine. Most pre-workouts don't have a set of ingredients. I think it just depends on the company or like the brand and what they specifically want it to do. So on the right side of your screen, there are three different types of molecules, and those three different types of molecules represent the three most popular ingredients that are used by the public and also by the companies or in this industry. So that includes creatine, biotin, and caffeine. So creatine is basically a natural supplement found in muscle cells. It helps muscles produce energy during heavy lifting or high intensity exercise. It also helps increase your endogenesis phosphocreatine. It aids in your ATP synthesis. It increases your strength and performance and also improves your body composition. Biotin is a specific type of zwitterion. Zwitterion is basically a molecule or ion having a positive or negative charged group, and that helps enhance performance in resistant trained individuals, and it also helps you enhance oxygen consumption. So caffeine is the last one and is the stimulant upon the central nervous system. So this basically helps with your attention and perception of effort during a fatigue exercise. It also helps stimulate the fatty acid mobilization, and it has various effects on muscle function. So there were two parts to this study. The purpose of the first part was to see if the pre-workout supplement craze by driven sport was safe to consume, specifically involving the blood flow to organs and tissues. The purpose of the second part is to determine the impact effects of craze when it comes to physical performance, body composition, mood, focus, cognition, and alertness. They did find a compound like methamphetamine in craze. It's called N-methamphetamine. It's towards the bottom of the list. It's a very powerful, highly addictive stimulant, kind of like meth. So on the left, you can just see that this is the specific label that is on the product. It is called Candy Grape, and it lists multiple different types. It even involves the three most popular ones, which is creatine, caffeine, and biotin. So here are the methods of part one of acute hemodynamic safety study. So 40 healthy men and women did participate in this study. To be considered eligible or even healthy, they had to be normotensive, they have to have a normal resting heart rate, and they had to have a basal body temperature. So when participants first arrive, they were required to present a baseline 24-hour diet recall. The researchers also asked them if they could replicate their fluid and food intake as best as possible, just so it didn't become a factor or variable to why the results are different each time. So it wouldn't increase or decrease the blood pressure or heart rate due to their food and fluid intake. They also weren't allowed to participate in any strenuous activities 48 hours before they came to visit. Okay, so when participants first show up, they had to do a pre-ingested measure and a post-ingested measure. So the pre-ingested measured is basically the baseline. So they measure your blood pressure and your heart rate, and then they also do a standard 12-lead ECG. And then after the post-ingested, they do measure the blood pressure and heart rate again at 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes, 150 minutes, and 180 minutes. And then they only measure 180 minutes after the ingestion for the ECG. And then the supplementation, it is randomized and a double-blind test. So participants consume one dose of either the MPP, which is a multi-ingredient performance product, which is the craze supplement, or the comparator, which is typically a drug that is similar to something that is already released on the market, which is basically only caffeine. Participants were instructed to fast overnight and to not consume no food or fluid with caloric content after midnight prior to each test. Each time they did take one dose, they were required to follow the instructions on the actual container, which states that they had to mix it in with 8 to 16 ounces of cold water. So here are the methods for part 2, which is the 6-week efficacy study. So 43 healthy men and women did participate in this study. Compared to part 1, there are more requirements to be considered during this eligibility. So that includes age, fat percentage, BMI, and then they had to have 2 or more years of experience in regular resistance training. And by regular, they just mean 3 days a week. So participants did have to submit a 3-day dietary recall. 2 of those days would be during the week, and then 1 of those days are during the weekend. And then researchers would follow up with their dietary recalls on weeks 3 and week 6 just to verify and see if participants are being consistent with their food intakes, just because it could affect the end results. So here are the methods of part 2 for the 6-week efficacy study. So participants did follow a specific 4-day plan designed by a certified strength and conditioning coach. 2 of them were upper body, 2 of them were lower body with a 4-day split. Participants began the program with 3 sets of 12 to 15 repetition maximizations, and then ended the program with 4 to 6 sets of 8 RMs. So the rest periods consisted of 1 to 3 minutes between exercises, and then 60 to 120 seconds between sets. So during this time of the 6-week course, they were not observed by anyone. They were kind of doing their own thing, but they were given a workout log, and they had to complete it every time they went to go work out, and it had to be signed off by either a workout partner or a training partner or a member of the fitness center staff. So it is a randomized and double-blind study as well. There were 2 groups. They matched them by age, weight, and resistance training experiences. Just like in part 1, they were instructed to ingest their MPP or their comparator with 8 ounces of cold water, but the difference is that they had to do it 30 minutes before each workout, and then on their off-day trainings, they still ingested 1 dose either during or before their breakfast. So during that 6-week period, they are ingesting something every single day, no matter if they are working out or not. So here are the results for part 1 of the acute hemodynamic safety study. So out of the 40 subjects or participants, 22 of them did receive the comparator, which is just caffeine, and then 18 received the MPP, which is the craze supplement. So in the MPP group, the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure was generally raised. There was no significant change in heart rate though, and then for the comparator, the systolic blood pressure did slightly elevate, and then the diastolic blood pressure did reduce. There was a significant reduction in heart rate as well. Okay, so real quick, this is just a chart of changes in blood pressure from the baseline to the post-baseline. So if you look on your left, it lists your systolic blood pressures and your diastolic blood pressures from 30 minutes to 120 minutes. They did leave out 150 to 180. I'm not really sure why, but they did. But I look over to the p-values on the right, and all of them are close to 0 compared to 1, which is the diastolic blood pressure at 90 minutes. It is 0.925. And typically, if it's closer to 1, that means that there is no significant difference that is detectable. And then if it's closer to 0, it is more likely that a difference does exist. And then just same with this chart, it's the same as the one before this one, it's just the changes in heart rate from baseline to post-baseline. It measures the heart rates from 30 minutes to 120 minutes. All of the p-values are close to 0, so there is a likely that a difference does exist. Okay, so here are the results for part 2 of the 6-week efficacy study. So out of the 43 participants, 21 subjects received the comparator, again, caffeine only, and then 22 subjects received the MPP, which is the craze supplement. It doesn't really specify in the article why not all the subjects completed the study, but they still were able to get the result that the MPP group did a lot better than the comparator group because it raised levels of energy and focus during all sets of upper body muscular endurance testing. There was a significant increase in concentration, an increased self-perception of focus, and decreased fatigue. So overall, the subjects who ingested the MPP just saw more improvements by weeks 3 and 6 compared to the comparator group. So real quick, here are just some tables. On the right side, it has to do with energy, and then on the left side, it does with concentration. So you can just see that even in the results that I just said, most of them were presented on week 3 and on week 6, and you can kind of see where the stars are at and on what sets they're on, and where it has definitely shown a difference and where they probably made more improvements in the MPP group compared to the comparator group. So even though the MPP had a lot of more improvements than the comparator, in the end, there aren't really that many significant differences, but the most important one is the one that pertains mainly to the article, which is the absolute values of muscular performance AP and the muscular endurance of RTF have no significant difference when it comes to if you take an MPP, which is the Cray supplement, or the comparator, which is just the caffeine. However, there is an exception when you are comparing the muscular endurance to its actual baseline rather than the muscular performance, just because there is a greater change. But overall, the participants actually did receive adverse effects from the supplements that they have been taking. So in the MPP group, they experienced more energy, but they were slightly jittery, they had headaches, they had stomach aches, and they couldn't sleep for the first week. And then in the comparator group, they also experienced more energy, but they also had stomach aches and headaches, but there was nervousness instead of having trouble sleeping. Okay, so in this table, it focuses on tissue, fat, lean, and then the lean and fat ratio. So you can see instead of measuring it by minutes, they did measure it by weeks 3 and by week 6, just because those are probably where you would see the biggest differences, because in the middle and in the end of the program, by looking at the p-values, some of them are closer to 1, but a lot of them are still closer to 0, which means there are slight differences that may exist. So in this table, it just focuses on the changes of vital signs. So vital signs basically stands for the blood pressure and the heart rate, but specifically in this table, it just focuses on the systolic and diastolic blood pressures. So it's similar to the second table. However, in the second table, it focuses on what is your blood pressure before you ingest and after you ingest without doing any type of activity or any type of workout, while this table focuses on what it's like after your resistance training. So there were 5 limitations that were presented in this study, and the first one happened during the six-week efficacy study because participants were not monitored daily during their supplement ingestion, and also their restrictions for their dietary intake was very lenient. So the ways that they tried to lessen those limitations was just to try to remain consistent communication. The second one is their measurement procedures, just because the tools that they have picked may have not been able to detect the changes in the lower body strength, power, or endurance, which could affect the actual results to the study. And then the third one is the attributes to the ingredient. The fourth is the cost and the time are very limited. And then the fifth one is that it does lack ecological practicality, just because the products such as MPP are very popular in the sports nutrition market industry. So it is becoming increasingly popular for athletes to use nutritional supplements. In the MPP group, it shows that there is an improvement of levels of energy, concentration, and focus, and a decreased fatigue during exercise. When you compare the MPP versus the comparator, it doesn't display any significant differences when it comes to body composition or exercise performance. So overall, even though the MPP group does improve a lot of things and it helps you get through a workout and it helps decrease fatigue, there are no really significant improvements when it comes to muscular performance or muscular endurance or even strength, or at least over a 6-week period. So maybe next time they could do a more controlled trial, which would be performed in widely used products. So you can better inform everyone of what you can use and what you can't use.